The following program is being brought to you on the Voice America Health and Wellness Channel. For more information about our network and to check our additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit voiceamericahealth.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the following program are strictly those of the host or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.
Loss in our lives takes on many different forms and can be more than just a physical loss. It goes beyond that to include emotional loss, business loss, and loss of personal health. This is Voices for Healing with Cathy Roberts. Today, Cathy and her guests will help you find out that you are not alone in dealing with loss and grief. There are so many different ways to deal with loss. What works for some may not work for others. Together, let's find the solution that you can use. Here's your host, Cathy Roberts.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to Voices for Healing Talk Radio. I am Cathy Roberts. I work as a professional counselor, coach, and educator based in the Washington, D.C. area. The people I work with live and grow in response to all sorts of loss and change, and that living with and growing with is not always easy. You can learn more about me and my work on my website, cathyroberts.net, and from there we can connect on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and more. You can also subscribe to Voices for Healing on iTunes and get regular podcast downloads. I want to acknowledge Pathways Magazine for their support of this program. Pathways is a free quarterly journal distributed throughout the Washington, D.C. area. You can pick up a copy at your favorite library or health food store, and the summer issue is now available. For listeners across the nation and around the world, Pathways is also available online at www.pathwaysmagazine.com. Each week, the show features a guest who has expertise in some area of healing loss and finding opportunity in our daily lives. My wish for everyone listening is that you connect with some of what you hear on the show and be inspired to use challenges to grow and become your most real and authentic self. On a personal note, I want to share with you listeners that I spent the last 5 days at a lovely mountaintop resort in the state of Georgia with nearly 200 of my colleagues in the American Academy of Psychotherapists. This is a time of renewal and turning inward for me, and a time of waking up to knowing more about who I am. And as I prepared for this morning's program, I realized that a lot of what I do when I go away on this annual work conference retreat is learn ways that I'm getting in my own way and looking at how I do that and getting to know more about it so that I can step out of that. So I really love the topic of this program as I segue out of the kind of inner work of the last 5 days and back into my outer work in the world. And I really appreciate that today my guest is Ginny Robertson. Hi, Ginny. Welcome to Voices for Healing.
Hi, Cathy. Thank you for having me.
Let me tell you listeners a little bit more about Ginny. Ginny Robertson is president of Ginny Robertson, LLC, an organization that connects women around the world to gifts, their purpose, and each other. She facilitates workshops, conferences, and retreats, and speaks to large numbers of women's groups throughout the year. In 2000, she founded On Purpose Networking for Women, and there are now 9 meetings each month in various locations in Central Maryland. She's also the founder, publisher, and editor of On Purpose Woman magazine, a free publication distributed in Maryland and also available online. Designed to assist women in leading richer, fuller lives, the magazine has been in circulation for 11 years. She's also a contributing author to 2 anthologies, The Spirit of Women Entrepreneurs and Conscious Choices, an Evolutionary Women's Guide to Life. For 3 years, Ginny was the co-host of Maryland Talk Live Radio on 680 WCBM in Baltimore, and in 2012, Ginny was named one of Maryland's top 100 women by the Daily Record. Ginny, as I read this, I'm thinking you're a Renaissance woman.
When I hear it, I go, wow, that's me.
That's you. Really cool. As we get started today, I want to ask our listeners to participate in a kind of way with this show. And here's what Ginny and I would like for you to do now, even before we get started with our conversation. What I'd like you to do is, or I invite you to do, is to bring to mind something that you want. It can be something in your personal life or your professional life, perhaps a goal you're moving toward, or something that you're already working towards and you want to continue in progress with. And as you listen to our conversation today, I invite you to apply the concepts, apply the ideas, apply what you hear Ginny talking about and sharing with us to this thing that you're focusing on. How can you use this conversation to help loosen up any ways that you're getting in your own way with this particular thing that you want and are interested in? So, Ginny, tell us how you first became interested in this topic. It's so powerful and so deep, getting out of your own way.
Well, I think that I was 33 years old before I had what I would consider my first conscious aha moment. I think I might have had some, but they weren't really conscious. And I was going through a divorce, and I'd gone into counseling. And I had my first session with this new counselor, and it was a woman. And I was telling her how it was, how I was being in the relationship, and some things about myself I wasn't liking very much, and some ways, things I was doing. And she leaned across her desk, and it was almost like she whispered a secret of the universe to me. And she said, well, guess what, Ginny? You don't have to do it that way anymore. And Cathy, I still remember the feeling, and that has been almost 30 years ago, that I had this feeling that the shutter had opened, a little bit of light had gotten in, and I knew something that I didn't know, 10 seconds before. And the good news about that is that I now knew something I didn't know before, and the bad news was I now knew something I didn't know before. Because it was like, oh no, I can. And it was really the first time in my life that I think I realized that I could change the direction of my life, that I could, by my choices, by my thinking, by my beliefs, that I could actually steer the course rather than just putting up with what life had dealt me. And that was kind of a common theme in my life. That's your bed, you have to lie in it. I'm sure you've heard that one before. And, you don't get divorced, you don't leave your job, you don't do any of those things back in the 70s and early 80s. It's just like, those are the rules. And this woman is telling me that I don't have to live by those rules anymore. And it was both liberating and absolutely terrifying all at the same time.
What I hear you saying, Ginny, is something about you were feeling disempowered when you were sharing with your counselor. And her words, you don't have to do it that way anymore, opened a window or opened a door into you knowing something more about your own power. It's yours. You have it. You can choose to use it. You might not have any idea what that means or how to do that in that moment, but her words opened the door to that for you.
That is absolutely the truth. She opened up this, I say it was like a huge cavern, and possibilities were just staring me in the face. But you're so right. I had no idea what to do with it in the moment. But what it did is it gave me a sense of freedom, that I was not a victim of my circumstances. I was not a victim of what had just happened in the past. I was not a victim of what was coming up. That I could actually steer my course myself, at least to some extent. I wasn't sure how much yet. But before I walked in her office, I didn't think I could steer it at all. So I would love to find this woman again, because here it is, 30 years later, and I'm still talking about it. And the huge impact that she had on my life in that one moment. I did continue to see her for a while and, was able to make some real changes. But that one moment when she told me this, which in retrospect sounds, kind of like, really? You didn't know that? But I didn't know that. I had no idea that I could change.
I'm thinking that a lot of people listening are probably thinking, wow, you knew that at 33? I'm still learning that now.
I know it is all relative, isn't it? Yes.
It
and
really
I'm still learning it too.
Yeah. We all are still learning it. Yeah. And so what would you say to somebody who is opening up to this and beginning, or I know, first of all, what do you say to people who maybe don't believe that, who don't believe that they're not a victim of their past? Is there some kind of words that you have for them when you talk with people in your workshop to begin to make that bridge between that feeling of disempowerment and opening up to our own personal power?
One of the things I ask them to look at is what they're getting from all of the negative beliefs that they hold on to, because they're getting some huge payoff, so they wouldn't still be doing it. So, if somebody says, well, I can't change that, blah, blah, blah happened, and I went, yeah, and you're loving living in it. You're getting something big from staying in that place. So how might it look if you got something big that felt better? It is a faith-based position, I guess, and the word faith can be used in so many ways. It doesn't have to be, a religious faith. It just has to be faith that if I step out, I will learn something. I won't die, in the moment. I will learn something new. I will take a step that will open up another step and another step and another step. So I think when we get really stuck in those old ways, it's obviously we're terrified of, what's that old saying, better the devil you know than the one you don't, something like that. So we're terrified that what if I even stick my toe in the water and start to believe that and it doesn't work out? Well, are you any worse off? Because if you're living in this really stuck, sad place as a victim, then any forward movement, I think, brings you out of that. So just taking one tiny little risk that says, maybe I could just start to notice what I'm thinking. Maybe I could just start to notice how I talk to myself, because I think that's where most of it comes from, is the self-talk and what we really believe about ourselves. Because I have to have a really strong opinion of me and my capabilities and my place in the world if I believe I'm a victim. I have to have a pretty strong belief system that supports that. So if I could start to just notice every time I have a thought that supports that belief that I'm a victim, and start to see how many times a day does that come up, and then start to ask myself, what evidence do I have that that's true? What are the facts?
And so what you're really saying to us is, before we make any kind of changes in our outside world, we can begin to look at what we're saying to ourselves and thinking about ourselves, and really paying attention to that.
Critical. It has to be, because I think where we so often go is, we go looking outside. We go looking for external things. Oh, if I just get that new job, I'll be happy. Or if I just find that new person in my life, or lose 10 pounds, or buy those new shoes, or, then I'll be happy, or I'll be better. It'll all be okay. And, we know not just from our own lives, but from watching other people, that just simply doesn't work. It just simply isn't true. And we also may start looking for other people to change first. Well, if that person would just be different, we would have a better relationship. Well, what I always say is, I'm the one who's always showing up. I'm the common denominator in all of my relationships, in everything that happens in my life. I'm the constant. So if something has to change, and I really want it to change, I have to start with me. Now, this doesn't mean that everybody gets a free pass. I don't want women to hear that. There are times when people have done horrific things to you. I'm not talking about just saying, well, that's fine. It's not fine. But I'm talking about, getting your power back, like you said earlier, and saying, is this the way I want to continue to live my life? Because I'm stuck back here based on what I'm perceiving other people to be doing or what they actually have done. They're fine. I'm the one suffering.
Mm-hmm. And I'm hearing you say something about we can heal our past and the real traumas and upsets that have happened, and at the same time be looking very diligently about our thoughts, about how we're talking to ourselves, and begin to look at that in a way that we are gentle about it rather than, this is my part in it, is that we're gentle about how we're doing this inner watching rather than critical. Because I think one of the things we can sometimes do is perpetuate that cycle by saying, oh, I'm thinking that again, or oh, I'm doing that again, and getting down on ourselves rather than a sort of open, oh, look, here's another chance to challenge this. Here's another chance to think something different. Here's another chance to talk to myself in a different way.
Yes, and I think that's such a critical point because we beat ourselves up enough. We don't need any more of that. And what I've learned to do over the years is to just kind of make friends with it and just to, I can laugh at myself and go, oh, there I go again. Who made up that great story, didn't I? Just figured out what she was thinking and knowing, and I have no clue what the truth is. So just start to notice, and again, do be gentle with yourself because I think there's a tendency also in this whole, I don't know what you would call it, a movement, if you will, of this idea that our thoughts are things. Our thoughts create our reality. When the movie The Secret and the book The Secret came out, there were a lot of people just saying, well, just change your mind. Just think something different. Well, that's great as a concept, but it takes work. And I've heard people, like just kind of almost discount people and saying, well, you brought that on yourself, or you manifested that negative thing. Well, maybe that's true, but I need to be the one that comes up with that truth. No one else can tell me that. And again, it has to be used on me, for me. I don't go using this on other people and telling them what they should or should not believe or what is true for them. I have to start to develop it myself. And so as I develop that sort of muscle, I start to notice those things, and I can go, oh, I can see now. Maybe I'll look at this instead. And it's a moment-to-moment thing. I still can take myself down a path. I did it yesterday, down a path of like, ooh, this happened, and no, I think this is what's going on, and, making up a whole story. And then I catch myself and go, be nice if I stuck to some facts here. What do I know for sure? What's the truth? So I want to go back to what you said. I think it is critical. Don't make this just one more thing on your to-do list that you then fail at. Because we have too many of those. Be gentle with yourself, use it on yourself, and just don't let people tell you what you should and should not be thinking. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It makes a lot of sense. And as you talked about The Secret has a lot of good stuff in it, and some of it sounds almost magical. Like if we do this, then this will happen. Yeah. And there's a depth that it's been a while since I read it, so I can't remember how evident this is in it or not. But there's a real depth to this kind of work that you're talking about doing. And it's not just a very simple thing, oh, I can think this differently and this will magically change. There's something going on that you're not thinking that way already, that you're not all ready to do that. And it's a little mucking around underneath the surface to get closer to that, to make friends with that, like we're talking about, rather than criticize and try to push away that and reject it. And so that's a part of what makes it, I think, a little challenging. Some people will say, oh, I tried that and it didn't work.
Exactly.
Well, that may be, and the missing piece may have been, you may have tried it on your own and not really had that opportunity to get feedback from others that might say, oh, but what about this piece? I noticed this about you, and I want you to love this part a little more.
Yeah, I think it is, and it is magical, and there's wonderful things about magic, but in between the thinking and the result, we have to also do some stuff. We can't just, I don't believe we can just sit in our chair and meditate and be successful in our business necessarily. We then have to go actually take some steps and do the physical work. And often when we go to take those physical steps and do the work, and it does involve change, that the fears kick in. And the fears are a huge clue to what's really in our way. When we
I want to stop you.
What we're afraid of. Yes.
I want to stop you right here, Ginny. It's already time for a break. I love what you're talking about the fears getting in the way. And I want to come back to this when we come back from our break. Before we go out, let me share with you, when we're not aware of what we're doing, we try the same thing over and over, hoping something different will happen. What's needed is some inner time to stop and reflect on what we did and on the outcome, and be still enough to allow something new to enter into the possible. We're taking a short break, and we will be right back.
Think you've seen everything there is to see in online television? Let us surprise you. Visit voiceamerica.tv today for sports, health, business, and more on demand 24/7.
Cathy Roberts is not only an exceptional radio host, she's an exceptional listener and counselor. Cathy appeals to motivated, high-functioning people to help them improve their health and vitality. Cathy can meet you where you are and help you identify what you want. Visit Cathy's website at www.cathyroberts.net or call her at 301-651-0019. Cathy works with both individuals and couples and specializes in grief and depression counseling. Get to know yourself by working with Cathy. Visit cathyroberts.net or call 301-651-0019. Cathy Roberts offers Circle of Voices teleclasses to help you focus your mind, engage your energy, and awaken your inner guide. Through this experiential and interactive series, you will know yourself more and learn to express yourself authentically in your personal life. Visit Cathy's website at cathyroberts.net to find out about this teleclass series, designed to open you to change and engage healing in the fabric of your life. Go to cathyroberts.net or call Cathy at 301-651-0019 for more information.
Now you don't have to stay linked to your desktop or laptop. Take Voice America on the go and listen anywhere. Get our mobile app for iPhone, BlackBerry, or Android at the Apple iTunes App Store, BlackBerry App World, or Android Market.
You are listening to Voices for Healing with your host, Cathy Roberts. If you have a question or comment for the program, please send an email to Cathy at cathyroberts.net. That's Cathy at cathyroberts.net. Now back to Voices for Healing.
Welcome back to Voices for Healing with my guest, Ginny Robertson. We're discussing Ginny's signature talk, Getting Out of Your Own Way. I want to share a quote from Dr. Barbara King, a minister based in Atlanta, who said, "The moment you move out of your own way, you make room for miracles to occur." We've begun the program by looking at some of the things that keep us from getting out of our own way. And Ginny was just talking about fears and how our fears can get in our way. So we will follow up right there where we left off.
Well, anytime we go to make a change, anytime we step out, could be a tiny little change, could be, I'm going to wear something I've never worn before, but it's not that different, but yet it's a little scary. We'll start to have a physical reaction in our body. Maybe some people feel it in their stomach, some people feel it in their chest. You may start to make up things about, it's not going to work. And that's the time to step back and say, okay, fear's kicking in big time. And a good time to ask yourself, where have I seen this before? How is this like something else I've been afraid of? And in that process, we can start to see that I believe our fears are based on old stuff. I think it's called mind mapping, where we see something and our brain starts looking around, where have I seen this before, where have I seen this before? And it'll match up to something in our past that may not be as relevant as our brain thinks it is. And it will have the same physical sensation from that, or the same fear will kick in. So it could be something completely different from what I'm experiencing, but yet the fear will feel the same. And sometimes it feels, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but sometimes I will feel a fear that is so much bigger than what I'm doing warrants. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, why am I feeling this way? What is going on? It was just a simple little thing, and now it's feeling like somebody's going to kill me. Mm-hmm. And so that's a clue that it's not just about what we're doing right now. So again, this doesn't require, I think, and you could attest to this, Cathy, just years and years and years of deep psychotherapy. It's just that we have to start paying attention and talking. I think, using a therapist to actually talk with about these things and to get them out and to, mirror the questions back to us. Because so often the fears have no basis in reality, and when they do, we can reframe them in such a way where we can see how it's not the same thing. I'm saying that in kind of a convoluted way. So let's say that I have, I'll give you a great example of this. I earn a lot of my money from speaking in public. I love it. I love doing workshops. I love doing keynotes. Nothing would make me happier than to be in a room of, 100,000 people and they're all listening to me say something. But I didn't speak in front of people until I was in my mid-30s. I was the president of the Thespians Club in high school, and I didn't act, but I liked to run things. And I remember people would say to me, why don't you try out for the play? And my answer would always be, it's not my thing. I don't do that. And I started doing some work on myself again, as I mentioned earlier, in my early 30s. And I was working for one of my corporate jobs, and I was headed to this conference in New York City. And the president of my company came in and told me that I was now going to be on a panel at this conference instead of a participant because they'd had a cancellation. And I heard myself say to him, I don't do that. And then he said to me, this isn't a request. It's an order, pretty much. But in that moment, what I also heard in my head, because, sometimes the voices in our head will actually support us. It's not always negative if we listen. This voice in my head said, well, how do you know you don't do that? You've never done it. And so I started sort of mustering up the courage to actually do this. I did it. I was on a panel with other people. There were 200 people in the room. I did okay. I didn't die. But it was within a couple of weeks of that process, I remembered something that I had forgotten all these years, at least consciously, that happened when I was 7. And I won't go into the whole story, but I was in church. I thought I had memorized my poem for the Easter Sunday service. I left it with my mother. I went up front and could not remember my lines and was devastated, humiliated, and ran from the church and flung myself under a weeping willow tree and sobbed. And so what I started to realize that somewhere in the back of my brain, wherever that stuff is stored, there was this belief that said, if I speak in public, 2 things will happen. I will forget what I'm going to say, and people will laugh at me. And the third thing is I will be humiliated. Now, I didn't remember that consciously. I even called my mother to make sure it really happened. And she said, oh, yes, it was just awful. I felt so bad for you. You were in such a bad place. I was 7. But I really think that during the ensuing years, that belief stuck in there and made me never even stick my toe in the water when it came to speaking.
And I can hear, as you talk about it now, your true laughter about that. Like that incident has lost its power.
Yes. Yes.
And I want our listeners to know that too, because if Ginny still felt that shame about it, we would have felt something about that too. We may have some feelings about how we feel listening to that story and what it stirs up in us about our own stories. And that's something different than what I'm talking about, because your listeners out there may be feeling something. But Ginny has released the hold that had on her. And that's what we can do for those little things that have that tug on us that keep us stuck. I want to move into a little bit of different topic as we move through this, and once again invite our listeners to reflect back on whatever that is that you said you wanted at the beginning of the show if you're participating in this little part of the exercise. And I want us to talk about the sometimes incongruence between what we want and what we believe. And what you just talked about was a wonderful segue into this. But you have a great story about a woman who shared with a group of people something that really just shone a spotlight on the incongruence between what she said she wanted and what was holding her back. Can you share that story with us, Ginny?
I would love to. And I met this woman one time. Don't remember anything about her, but again, you never know where you're going to get your best material. I was speaking to a large group of university women, and I had asked them at the beginning to all think of something they really wanted for their life, much like you did today. And then I started talking about our belief system and how our beliefs can become really, really solid and become the truth for us, but they're not necessarily the truth for everyone. And so I asked the women to think of something that they believe to be true in their life or in life in general that some of the other women may not agree with. And they started shouting out, the logical things or the obvious things like religion and choice and politics and all of these things. And this young woman stood up in the back of the room, and she was very excited, waving her hand around, and she goes, I've got one. And she goes, I believe all men are slime. Well, there were some women, and there were probably a couple hundred women in the room, and there were some women in the room who clapped and yelled and agreed with her and thought that was pretty funny. But the bulk of the women in the room kind of looked at her and with this sort of, really? And so it was a great example of, her truth versus other people's truths. So I asked if I could chat with her for a minute, and she was so gracious and let me work with her. And I asked her what she had written down on her sheet earlier in the evening when I asked people to write down something they wanted. And she very sweetly and lovingly said, I really want a committed, loving relationship and a family. And the women in the room laughed. Everybody but her laughed. Because, it's very easy to see this in other people. It's not always so easy to see it in ourselves. And what she wasn't seeing in that moment is that what she wanted and her belief, her very strongly held belief about men, were in direct opposition to each other. And that as long as she held that strong belief about men, she had a very, very, probably no chance at all, really, of making that dream come true, of having this loving, committed relationship. She could have had a relationship, but she wanted a loving, committed relationship and a family. And so I asked her if she dated much, and she goes, well, not much because, all men are alike, and I meet one, and I think he's nice, and then he'll show me that he isn't, and there just aren't any good men out there. And I said, well, there are good men out there, and I said, but they're running for cover. I said, because you're not really much fun to be around, I guess. I said, so what happens when you go out with a man? And she goes, well, he seems nice at first, but then he'll eventually, show himself. And what she wasn't seeing in all of this is that, I told her she had a big beacon on her head, a big light that said, I'm here. If you want to come and prove me right, here I am. And so she would, even if she met someone, who was basically a really nice guy, he probably wasn't going to be all that attentive by the end of the evening because she was trying to show his bad side. And so I think by the end of our conversation, she had started to see that, what she said she wanted was way out. Not only was it not congruent with her belief, I said they're in different states. They're not even in the same geographic location. So instead, and I'm sure she could find all kinds of evidence to prove her belief true. That's sometimes the bad news about this is that we have all kinds of evidence to say, see, I told you. And so what I explained to her that I thought was going on is as long as she held that belief system, she didn't have to change. She didn't have to take any risks. She could just keep doing the same thing over and over again and then lamenting that she wasn't getting what she wanted. So I even questioned whether she really wanted the relationship as much as she thought she did or whether it was just a nice idea. And so I think that is, over all these years, that is still the best example I have ever seen of how unconscious our beliefs can be. I mean, she said it out loud, but I don't think she had any clue that how it was affecting this thing that she wanted, that she said was the most important thing to her in her life right now.
I love that story because of the strong contrast between her belief and what she said she wanted. And I think our listeners can maybe look at what they want and be on the lookout in the upcoming weeks after this conversation that we're having. If it doesn't come to you right now, you may even ask around to people and check out and find out and get to know more about what beliefs you might have that are getting in the way of you getting what you want that you don't even know about, like this woman who could say within, it sounds like 20 minutes or so, two things that are highly contrasting and made really clear what was getting in the way. So it sounds like as we begin to bring our beliefs and wants into alignment, one of the things we might begin to do is look for, first of all, become aware of what those beliefs are, which you just demonstrated how this woman did that in your group, and then begin to look for evidence that that belief is not actually true.
Yes. I think that if we could look at our life as just, we get up in the morning and we look out at the world and we all perceive it differently. And those perceptions come from a multitude of places, but basically they come from everything that's happened up to this point in our lives. Some are bigger than others, some are stronger than others, some are more important than others. How I feel about Brussels sprouts does not impact my life a whole lot. But how I feel about me and my place in the world impacts every aspect of my life. So there's different varying degrees of of importance of our belief system. But let's say information comes in. Everyone listening to this radio show right now is having a different experience of you and me based on what they already know to be true or believe to be true. And so information comes in, and what usually happens is we just judge it very quickly. We don't think about the judgment, we just judge it. And then we kind of do a behavior from that. We just do something, and then we get a result. Some of the results we like and some we don't like. And results we like, we rarely go back and say, well, why did that work out? What did I do well? What did I do right? How did my belief system support me there? But that's a great place to start to look is, okay, what is working well in my life right now? And what do I believe about that? How is my belief system supporting me in that? And I think you'll find, the listeners will find that your beliefs are pretty in line with what's going well in your life, or else it would be more of a struggle. So what usually happens is when we get a result we don't like, though, we don't go back up and look at, well, what are my perceptions about this? What do I believe to be true? We just say, well, I'm just going to do something different. I'm going to do something different. I'll change my behavior. And, you see that a lot with, people who want to quit smoking or want to quit eating sugar or want to stop drinking or any of that stuff. I mean, you can stop that stuff for a while with willpower. I call it grim persistence, which is not very attractive to me, not very joyful. You can just stop it, but you won't necessarily heal it. You'll just stop the behavior, but you won't be doing anything different. And, we probably all know the people in our lives who stopped drinking but didn't do any of the work associated with that. And, I knew someone who stopped drinking, and he was just as mean as he was before when he was drinking, but he just wasn't drinking anymore because he hadn't done anything to go back and say, what is it about me and my relationship to alcohol, and what is going on with me back here? What do I believe about all of this? And that's why I think the long-term results for that kind of behavior, that kind of change aren't lasting, and they're also just not very much fun. We just have to constantly be vigilant. And, I can be vigilant about sugar until somebody waves my favorite one in front of me, and then I have a decision to make. But if I get clear, if I go back up to, why would I want to stop eating sugar? What is it about my health that is important to me? What is it about how I want to live my later years in life? If I can start to buy into that whole concept and see a vision for my life, that's what supports me. That's what starts to shift my thinking. And then I can get a different result. But the thing is, we don't often go back up there and poke around and see, what do I believe to be true about this?
Yeah, in order to do what you're talking about, it strikes me that we need to be aware of what we're doing and get still enough to be able to observe ourselves and ask ourselves some questions rather than staying active and in motion and moving forward and doing the next thing, which I think can be the tendency. Well, that didn't work, then I'll try this. And that didn't work, I'll try this. And rather than scooting off in one direction after another, what I really hear you saying is something about slowing it down enough to pay attention to what you did, check it out, ask about it, and make a decision about what you might do differently next time.
Yes, and that's not exactly what we hear a lot in society. We're about doing. Well, if that didn't work, let me just try something else instead of stepping back and going, okay, what do I know to be true here? What is my experience telling me? What are the facts here? And to get quiet enough, we can't possibly make changes from a doing place. We're just doing. We're just handling stuff. This work is not something to put on your to-do list and mark off. You're never done with it. And so it's just this process of awareness but 10 minutes a day would be enough. And, I know people who've said to me, well, I don't have 10 minutes a day. And I said, I don't believe you.
Yeah.
Everyone has 10 minutes a day. It's just how are you choosing to spend that 10 minutes now? And if you like how you're spending it now, then fine, don't do anything else. But if you can carve 10 minutes out somewhere, sit quietly and just see what comes in. But so often we just don't stop talking or thinking or have noise around us. The TV's on, the radio's on, chatter, just sit quietly. And being quiet is scary. It took me a long time to get comfortable with being with me. And I remember the first time I was going to this retreat, and I found out that I was going to work for the company, so I pretty much had to go. But I found out that it was 5 days of silence outside of the room. In the room, in the program room, you could talk, but all the meals, everything was in silence. And I was on a ferry heading over to this island and practically had a psychotic break. I tell you, Cathy, I was shaking. I was so upset that I was not going to be able to talk with people. But really, I was upset because I was going to have to be with myself for 5 days, and I had no idea what that felt like. And I got through it. I did get a terrible migraine for 3 days. I don't think that was any accident, but I lived through it. But we don't foster that. We don't really. I think that's changing. But what would happen if they gave kids like 5 minutes to just be still, if they could? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
to be still and breathe and just sit quietly and relax for a minute. I think that could really work.
I'm totally with you. And I'm also with you in the fear that we have about what's going to come up and what we're going to learn about ourselves as we do this. And the truth is, whatever that is, it's already there and it's already working within us. We just don't know it.
Yeah.
And as we sit with ourselves and get to know ourselves more in that compassionate way, then as we know more about it, then there's more that we can do about it, acting from a place that really supports us. It's already time for our second break, Ginny. So whatever thoughts you have, I want you to hold for now.
Okay.
Creating change requires us to do the inner work. Change happens on the inside first and then manifests in our outer worlds. It's helpful to have a partner or group to support our process, or at least someone who can give you feedback. After a short break, we will be right back with Ginny Robertson and Getting Out of Your Own Way.
Your favorite Voice America Talk Radio Network shows and hosts are in your car, outdoors, and wherever you need them to be. Listen anywhere. Get our mobile app for iPhone, BlackBerry, or Android at the Apple iTunes App Store, BlackBerry App World, or Android Market.
Cathy Roberts offers Circle of Voices teleclasses to help you focus your mind, engage your energy, and awaken your inner guide. Through this experiential and interactive series, you will know yourself more and learn to express yourself authentically in your personal life. Visit Cathy's website at cathyroberts.net to find out about this teleclass series, designed to open you to change and engage healing in the fabric of your life. Go to cathyroberts.net or call Cathy at 301-651-0019 for more information. Cathy Roberts is not only an exceptional radio host, she's an exceptional listener and counselor. Cathy appeals to motivated, high-functioning people to help them improve their health and vitality. Cathy can meet you where you are and help you identify what you want. Visit Cathy's website at www.cathyroberts.net or call her at 301-651-0019. Cathy works with both individuals and couples and specializes in grief and depression counseling. Get to know yourself by working with Cathy. Visit cathyroberts.net or call 301-651-0019.
Your favorite Voice America Talk Radio Network shows and hosts are in your car, outdoors, and wherever you need them to be. Listen anywhere. Get our mobile app for iPhone, BlackBerry, or Android at the Apple iTunes App Store, BlackBerry App World, or Android Market.
You are listening to Voices for Healing with your host, Cathy Roberts. If you have a question or comment for the program, please send an email to Cathy at cathyroberts.net. That's Cathy at cathyroberts.net. Now back to Voices for Healing.
As we begin our concluding segment of the program, I want to thank my colleagues at Core Constellation Center in Rockville, Maryland, for their support of this program. Thank you all. Ginny, as we come into the concluding segment of our program, I want you to have a few minutes to share with us what upcoming events you have and what projects you have happening that you would like to share with our listeners.
Well, Cathy, once a year for the last at least 10 years, I have done Getting Out of Your Own Way, a workshop, a full-day workshop, in-person workshop. And I usually do it in January or February for those people who want to kickstart the new year and really get moving. And last year I decided to also offer it mid-year, because often we have great intentions and we have great goals, and then halfway through the year we realize we're off course, or maybe even our goals have changed. We don't want what we thought we wanted. And so I'm giving women an opportunity to show up and actually work on that. And I've scheduled my next one for August 15th, 16th, or 17th. It's a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It's a one-day workshop, but the participants can choose the day they want to attend. It's a full-day workshop at my home in Lutherville, Maryland, which is in northern Baltimore County. And it's an amazing time for people to come together and get some clarity, but also to get support and to really be able to have that time that you and I talked about, that there's some quiet time, there's some reflection time, there's some time to really look at, what I believe, what is going on for me right now, and to walk away with some real tools. This is not just I'm going to feel good when I leave. You actually walk away with some concrete tools and a support system in place and a commitment and accountability partners to make sure something happens. And my plan is also, need to pull this together in the next 2 months, my plan is to also offer some version of this in a virtual format. So whether it will be a webinar, something. I have not done that yet, but I'm getting a lot of requests for it from people who are not local to Baltimore. Of course, ideally, you show up and you get the in-person support. But if you're not here, then stay tuned for more information about having this experience virtually.
I think that's a great idea. Ginny, can you share your website with people, maybe our listeners who aren't familiar with you and who would like to know about that future virtual offering you might have?
Yes, it's very simply GinnyRobertson.com, and it's GinnyRobertson. Once they go there, there's an upcoming events link. Click on that, and then there's months there. So the Getting Out of Your Own Way will be on the August page. Everything's up there now. Everything they need to know. Excellent.
And those of you in the Washington-Baltimore area who don't already know Ginny, aren't familiar with her magazine, please go to her site. She offers all kinds of really super things for women, particularly entrepreneurs, also in this area. So I hope you'll check her out.
Ginny, and a social media presence. So check me out on Facebook and connect with the group there. A lot of support there also.
Yes, very good. Glad you stuck that in there. One of the other ways that we can begin to dismantle these beliefs we have is to take a look at the rules we've made or the choices that we made early on. And maybe we couldn't have made any other choice at the moment, but still it was our decision. It seems that knowing something about our rules and the decisions we made to create that rule are a part of this process of getting out of our own way. Can you comment on that?
Yes, and often I don't think the rules are even our rules. We inherited some of these rules. We inherited these kind of norms through our family. We observed, we watched, we heard this truth. One of the big ones that people mention is money. We all have truths about money, and most of them are things that we heard in our family, about money, and we take that on and we act as though it is ours. You've heard me tell people that I'm a recovering good girl. And I learned at a very early age how to be good enough so that I would be accepted and praised and patted on the head and treated well. And so I had some real rules about what it meant to be in the world, what it meant to show up. And one of those rules that I heard growing up is it's not polite to talk about yourself. You shouldn't brag. Now, fast forward that, 40 years, and I'm now creating a business, and I've got to go out in the world and tell people that I'm good at something and why they should hire me, why they should work with me. But there's this nagging rule that says it's not polite to talk about yourself. We'll talk about direct contradiction there. And so we have to, again, like we do with our beliefs, a rule really is a belief. They're the same thing, but they're a little bit stronger sometimes because we have some real evidence for it. Because, my mother told me this, or my grandmother, or my teacher. So it is a rule of behavior. This is how you are in the world. And I can see, and I got called out a lot as a young girl, little girl, for showing off, for being too full of myself, too big for my britches, my mother would call it. And so I learned that that's not okay. And so if I'm going to be okay in this world, then I have to abide by those rules. And so the rules those kind of rules usually don't support us in having what we say we want. It's, again, direct opposite of that. And so this time that we take then as we start to delve into what do we believe to be true? What is the proof? What are the facts? Are these rules? And they can be very simple rules around, you don't send a Christmas card to somebody this year who didn't send you one last year. Did you ever hear that one growing up? You keep a list.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that took me years to realize that, no, I'm going to send cards to people I want to send cards to. I'm not going to keep track. It's not it's not a game. Just send it because you want to, not because it's an obligation. And so those rules, again, that's not a big one that's going to harm me, but boy, there are some that will if I let him.
Yeah. So once again, our listeners who are participating in the little exercise might begin to think about and identify some of the rules that cement your beliefs. And if you're having trouble identifying these and you can't quite see or get a sense of what they might be, you may wish to do what we suggested earlier in the program, which is ask a friend or family member, somebody who you trust, somebody who you're comfortable and who's safe to talk to about these sorts of things, about what they think your rules might be. That doesn't mean you have to believe what they say, but maybe they'll help you get closer to knowing a little bit more about yourself if you're having trouble doing that. Now, Ginny, you talk about having the three biggest excuses, as you call them, are dream stealers, the things that we tell ourselves that are lies that really inhibit our process. Can you share those with us at this point?
Yes. For me, the three biggest lies that we tell ourselves are, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough money, and I don't have enough energy. Now, at any given time in our life, we could look at each of those and believe that they are true in that moment, and they may very well be. But what we tend to do is use them as a universal excuse. So an opportunity comes up, and I immediately go, I can't afford it. As soon as I say I can't afford it, the door slams shut, and there is no opportunity for me to actually look at this and see if I might be able to afford it. Instead, I just say, I can't afford it. And then why this works so well is that we have people around us who agree with us. So, you may say to your friend, well, I really want to go to that conference, but I can't afford it. I know I'm broke too. So you get support in that. The door slams shut. What if instead we said, I really want to do this, but in order to pay for that, I can't pay my rent, and I'm choosing to pay my rent instead. But I really want to do this, so what are some other ways that I might be able to make some extra money or save some money or move some things around or do something to plan for this? And so then we start to get creative. And once we start to get creative and get clear, it's amazing what will often show up. I wouldn't be surprised if you got a phone call from somebody that said, you probably forgot that I owed you $100, but I'm sending it to you today. We just open up the channel to receive. And again, it sounds magical, but it's all about intention and it's all about clarity and really knowing and not just being on autopilot with our excuses.
And the example you gave, the original thing was, I don't have enough money. It's a real shutting down. Whereas if you think, well, I'm making a choice. I have a priority here and I do need to pay my rent.
Yes.
So that's the first thing I need to do. I need to be responsible for myself because that's really what we're talking about here is being responsible for yourself on a really deep way. And so, okay, well, I'll be responsible. And what else can I do to make what I want happen? And I think that's really crucial.
Yeah. That is coming from a very powerful place. Otherwise, we're just victimized by this lack of money, this perceived lack of money. And then we just get down on ourselves even more. And we're not very creative in that space. We're just kind of like, and you know how heavy that is.
Yeah. And Jenny's example was about money, but the other dream stealers she talked about were time and energy. Mm-hmm. And so those are the other parts that you can do the same little practice with.
Yes.
So, Ginny, we're down to just 2 short minutes. If you could just say in a sentence what you think is the biggest challenge that lies in this inner work of getting out of our own way.
Wow. First, it's knowing that we are in our way and that it's not somebody else in our way. Mm-hmm. So acknowledging that, accepting that can be the truth, And then seeing the power in that, instead of looking at that as like, oh no, go, oh yeah, how amazing is it that I get to do this now? I don't have to depend on somebody else. And so I think the next most challenging thing is to see ourselves as important enough to do the work. Because this is,
beautiful.
I think, the greatest gift we can give to ourselves is to take the time and the energy that is involved in gaining this clarity and actually living this kind of life. Because, again, it is a process. It is a lifestyle change. It is not an assignment that you complete and you're done with.
Mm-hmm. This is really a philosophy or a desire to live in a particular way where you're owning your life, you're owning your power, and you have a willingness to look at yourself in the middle of it all. Well, I just can't believe how quickly our time has passed. Ginny, I'd like you to stay on the line if you could as we begin to close out here. Okay?
Thank you, Cathy. Enjoyed it.
Yeah. And thank you, Ginny, for joining me today. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. And I hope you got some good information. And those of you who are participating in the exercise, I really want this to be helping you move forward on something that you'd like to bring about that you brought to mind at the beginning of the show. And you've gained greater awareness about what that is, the beliefs that may be limiting you, and what you can do to begin to change and know that that happens on the inside. Join me next week. My guest will be Sheila Himmel, co-author of Changing the Way We Die, Compassionate End-of-Life Care and the Hospice Movement. We will be discussing her book. And her book is really very much about how to live well as how to die well. Until next Monday, this is Cathy Roberts encouraging you. Transform yourself, embrace your vitality. See you next week.
Thank you for listening to Voices for Healing. Please join Cathy Roberts again next Monday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific Time, 11 a.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Health and Wellness Channel. We wish you the best recovery from your loss, and we'll talk again next week.